We got Michael Allen with us on the stream from the Movie Minute. Dude, you've had a pretty cool YouTube channel going on. It's gotten I was just checking out. Like you just started it like what, maybe like 6 months ago. It seems like maybe
It's
longer.
been a year.
Has it been a year?
But
Okay.
I mean, I do think the first like 3 or 4 months were not so serious. Like it was
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, I'm going to do a few things. And so I've
Yeah.
really at least found a bit of a groove in the past 6 months, 6 to
Yeah.
7 months or so.
Yeah. No, that's kind of what it seems like. That's even with my channel. My first video was like a couple people were wondering how to break in the spine of an omnibus, and so I'm like, all right, I'll just do a quick top down. Never showed my face. It was just like me talking while I like looked through a book and like showed them how to do it. And that video is not my top video, but it's like 4 years, 3.5, 4 years old now. But like I didn't really start my actual channel, like really producing content for like a year and a half after that. So my channel's like 3.5 years old, but it's really only like 2.5, maybe 2.5. Yeah. So yeah, you kind of get that like, oh, you've been going for a while, but like really seriously like making content and trying to brand and all that. Yeah,
totally. I think the reason I launched my channel, I've been wanting to do it for a while, just wanting to do a movie channel on YouTube for a long time, but I had never really found the right moment where I was like, oh, now's the time. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because I had gotten really into this mobile game, Mario Kart Tour.
Yeah.
And I was playing that and I was fairly competitive in it. So pretty involved in that community. And then the Mario movie was coming up. And I was like, if I was ever to launch a YouTube, right now would be a great time because I have a good audience. And so They always say, I heard a lot saying, oh, your first 100 subs are hard, like difficult, like it's just a grind to get your first 100. And so I was like, well, maybe I could jumpstart this with my Mario Kart community and do the Mario movie. So I did a very it's almost embarrassing now. I've thought about taking it down, but I'm like, no, just leave it up.
You got to let that ride. You just got to let that go.
Yeah, it's like I was just standing in my bedroom, like with my wall and like a few little lights up, and recorded it, and sure enough, like kicked it out to the community, and I think within like 3 or 4 days, I had over 100 subs, like really fast.
Nice. Yeah.
And so kind of launched it at least into a little bit of a baseline, like a baseline group of people that were going to engage with my content. And then I was able to go from there. But I haven't necessarily marketed a lot either. I'm not doing a ton of like pushing it yet. It's just a fun thing that I really enjoy doing. I love talking movies. And it's just been a great year. I mean, it's been a good year talking movies. And I have a lot of great good ideas for the future of different content, but right now, kind of enjoying the space. So
yeah, well, I mean, it's good for you too because I guess we'll do some qualifications. So, I guess a little bit of history too. So, like, I'm just getting my chair around. So you and I met in film school in LA. So
we're so old, man. We're old now.
I know. I was just thinking about that the other day. I was like, what year was that? 2007? No, it was 9. It was 9. We were fall 09. That's right. So, yeah,
which doesn't feel a long time ago, but that's 15 years ago.
15 years ago this fall. Holy crap.
Oh.
So, man. So we met in film school. So, like, it was like a capstone kind of thing. Like, we didn't do 4 years. I didn't do 4 years of film school. I did comms. And then my capstone, my concentration in comms was film studies.
Yep.
And then I don't know how yours worked because I was up in Seattle area and you were over in Florida.
I was a radio TV film major at Cal State Fullerton in California. But then same deal, like the Los Angeles Film Study Center. The reason I went there, it's mostly because like they were a semester type program, but they had great internships, right? That was the whole thing. It's like, they were like, hey, we'll get you an internship in Hollywood if you come. And so I remember being like, well, that just seems like an easy yes.
Yeah. Well, and you, like my internship, it was fine. It was like working at a Asylum Entertainment, like a smaller, I mean, it was decent size, but they did a bunch of like, they had 3 of the ESPN 30 for 30s. So I did like transcribing, because, you know, we're interns, we do grunt work, or at least I did. So it was like transcribing. One of my big projects was transcribing the phone call audio of the guy who murdered Michael Jordan's dad. And so it was like just listening to this guy for hours on end through like the jail like recording audio. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awful. But I did that, and then I had to do like, you know, frame by frame time cuts for like World's Wildest Vacation videos. One of those ones where people send them in and some dude like overly excitedly narrates and stuff. But then I got to shoot like spec footage for some like Barbecue Masters, I think is what it ended up turning into. So that was cool. Yeah. But awesome. But you actually had a good internship. You were doing real stuff and having some good times.
It's funny. I was just talking to some friends about this the other day about how the funny thing about my internship, which we're holding it, the tension. What is it? The funny thing is like only 2 people from LAFSC interviewed for that job, and it was because, so big reveal, my internship was with Marvel Entertainment, Marvel Studios, but it's funny because Marvel has a bunch of subsidiaries, and so it was Marvel, but they're working with all these different studios, they're doing different projects, and so the studio was Marvel Studios with Film Roman. And that was like a small animation studio that at the time was producing a lot of Marvel's really high-end animated content. Like they were doing a kid's show called Superhero Squad, which was a show I worked on, which is just really silly. I mean, it's great for 5-year-olds, like superheroes for 5-year-olds. And then
my kids are like eating up Spider-Man and Friends right now.
Yeah, so it's very much like that. I mean, I would even venture to say Spider-Man and Friends is a legacy product from like something like Superhero Squad, because they was the first to do that style, the big heads and like the Funko type ish feel to it. But they were also doing Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which I don't know how many people have seen that, but it's like incredible show.
Dude, really, that show's amazing.
It's so good.
I love that show.
So yeah, I mean, I came in and interviewed, but very few people in our group in our semester wanted it because it was animation, and they were like, I want to do like video and all this stuff. And so I was like, but I love animation. And I remember walking into the office for my interview, and I like walked into the producer's office. Her name's Dana, and I like look at the wall, and I like looking around the wall, and she has like Batman the Animated Series posters all over with like her name on the posters.
Oh my gosh.
And then I like looked on the other wall, and it was like the original Ninja Turtles, and I was like, who is this lady?
Like the early late 80s, early 90s.
Yes. Stuff? And I'm like, this is like my childhood, like what I grew up watching. And she like came in, I'm like, did you produce these? And she's like, oh yeah, I was a producer on these shows. And I was like, and I just fanboyed the whole interview. Like I was like, oh, remember when the Joker, that? And I'm like talking about episodes like that were impactful to me. And I left that interview for the internship thinking I screwed this up royally. Yeah. Like I am not going to get this job. And sure enough, next day got the call. She was like, yeah, we want you to come and work with us. And I'm like, oh man. And I remember going in, and then she was like, we love fanboys, it's like,
well, the thing is, if you have people, I mean, you look at it like, if you have people who are really passionate about the IP and really passionate about the stories and telling a story and having stories affect people, like you're talking about how like they affected you, like that's like, you can teach skill. You can teach that all day. You can teach how to shoot a camera. You can teach how to, animate. And I mean, there's definitely like, like when you get that high up, you got to have that factor too, like some of that natural talent, but you can teach a lot of that too.
Oh,
But having that passion for storytelling and telling stories about things like Batman or Spider-Man or whatever studio you're working with or show you're working on, having that passion, you can't really teach that. Like, you can get ingrained in it and know it, but if you're not passionate about it, it's not going to show.
yeah.
And like we've seen with the state of the MCU or DCU or anything like that, like you can tell if a director or a actor or someone who's helping work on the thing isn't passionate about it. They're just kind of there for the paycheck or maybe as a resume booster. So like, even if you didn't have the skill, which I mean you do, and you did, it's like getting someone on board that's gonna really push behind it. So okay, so you got invited to work at a Marvel subsidiary animation studio.
I did. And my career really just went from there. What's up, T. Hodgins? Looks like we got T. Hodgins in the chat.
Yeah, nice. What's going on? Good
Welcome.
to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, the journey was a really a lightning from there. But I mean, I worked there for almost 2.5 years. And then obviously Disney came in and bought Marvel. So there was a huge shakeup.
Mm-hmm.
They basically laid off everybody, the mouse, coming in, laid off everybody because Disney's like, oh, we have our own animation department.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a few other shows with them, like different things. And I was on set for Captain America First Avenger a little bit during my time at Marvel. And I was there when I was there for some post sessions for Thor, the OG original Thor 1. And I was around when a lot of scripts were being written for the MCU. Like the last script being written when I left, the early stages of Guardians of the Galaxy was being written. And so, nice. I mean, there was things floating around the office and different meetings. And I was in a few of those meetings taking notes for my boss and like I was a grunt back then for sure, but it was kind of cool to look back now, and look back at the MCU and like phase 1 and just how strong just the Infinity Saga was. Yeah. It's kind of interesting to look back and be like, oh man, that's crazy that I was there in the hallways walking around. And even in one of the hallways we had up, they had the big timeline. They had the timeline up already of what they're planning, right? And I think at the time they had only gone, I think, halfway through phase 2, and there was a lot of stuff up on the wall that never got made. But it's crazy to think back to those days of the Marvel, of that, how the hype of that, which is such an interesting thing because I've been having a lot of conversations with people recently where it's like, I just don't think that's ever going to happen again. I just don't know if it can be done. Like the scale by which they did it, and just the right actors in the right movies at the right time. And
it was lightning in a bottle for sure. I think it's going to be hard to capture that again.
Totally. 10 years, the fact that they did a saga that covered 10 years of comics content and fairly I mean, you're way more now in the comics world than I am, but I mean, fairly well received adaptations, which is hard to do in the comics world to get fans to come in and be like, oh yeah, this is a good adaptation of this character. Yeah. And so, I mean, fairly beloved across the board. I mean, some weaker ones along the way, but yeah, I mean, just still an incredible thing that I don't think. It's hard to imagine as a filmmaker and looking at all of the variables that go into filmmaking and storytelling, and really storytelling over mass, large, huge stories, years spanning multiple movies. Everything has to fall into place, and I think it did with the MCU. And so I for me, it makes it that much more special. Just looking back at the Infinity Saga and being like, man, no one's ever going to do this again. I just don't see it happening. And so I'd love to be surprised. I'd love for somebody to surprise me, but it's I don't see it happening. Yeah.
I think, I mean, we're kind of naturally bridging from where we were talking about, how you got, involved with, our backgrounds and stuff with filmmaking and all that. And now we're kind of we're going to talk about comic movies, which if we're talking comic movies, there's kind of two big pillars in that industry is MCU and DCU. So yeah, with like, I think the big thing that made it so well received was that it took its time. It paced itself. It wasn't trying to sprint. It was doing that marathon thing. Like, they've said with, Iron Man 1, it was just kind of an experiment. Is this going to work? And, they made it this kind of insulary, like just Iron Man. And, they brought in, like Nick Fury and some things and some very obscure side characters or, B-list characters. And then that was well received. And so they slowly built in, like, oh, we'll bring in like Black Widow and she'll just be kind of a cool side character, but doesn't need a whole movie or a whole series or anything like that, or you don't need her whole backstory. So we'll just bring her in as like a cool character, and all the fanboys and people who are really into Marvel and all that will understand what's going on. But yeah, I think they took their time, and I think that's why phase, what was it? The Infinity Saga, like, because what is that? 3 phases. I think that's why it worked so well. It's like they paced themselves, and now afterwards they're like just trying to be like, let's do this again, and which is fine, but they're doing it so quickly and they have so many characters and so many things going on that it's just that, like, it's hard to keep up and care when you have that much thrown at you at once.
100%. Yeah. I think they went into the cash cow space, right? See how just like a D-list character. It's funny because Iron Man, back when they made Iron Man, like back when they made that first movie, which by the way, we can talk in a little bit, but I think one of the strongest movies. Oh yeah. In the saga itself. But it's funny because at the time, Iron Man was like a D-list character during that time.
Yeah.
Like people were like, nobody cared about Iron Man. It was all about Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man had all the stuff, and X-Men. Like there's a few others, but it's like Iron Man was so ignored. Like, it's just funny that they launched it from Iron Man, because at that time Ireland was a nobody. And that's why I think when they cast Robert Downey, like it was lightning in a bottle. It's like it's just a perfect cast.
Yeah.
Right away.
Like his personal, like his personal arc, like Robert Downey Jr.'s personal arc with like struggling with addiction and things, and like his life being ruined, very much kind of mirrors. He's obviously not like a billionaire philanthropist, super genius, but he's a pretty smart guy, and obviously he's rich, but like he's got the similar wit, and he has that background that he can really tap into of addiction that I think really kind of is the foundation of that character. So it's cool, like they got someone who really mirrors that character, and they played it safe.
His performance. I mean that's the thing, right? It's like that's probably part of why that character was so relatable and so like everyone connected so well with him. It's because he basically lived a lot of that, and so it's like he's bringing a lot of his own life experience into the role. So I totally agree. Like, I loved that movie. I loved it.
Yeah, I think, man, it was so good. Well, like you're saying, he's like a D-list. So it was kind of like, D-list character. But so it was kind of them playing it safe. Like, hey, we're taking a character no one really cares about, at least right now. Like the vast majority of even comic nerds care about. They don't, but it's a very kind of grounded, realistic, like, okay, you just make him a super genius, tons of money, and he makes like mech armor basically, which is the only real big suspension of belief or disbelief is that he can make these types of things. Otherwise, it's all very believable.
Totally.
So I think, and it was a safe character because no one's going to be super upset if you change him up too much. But they didn't even change him up too much, so it worked out pretty well. So
sure, man. Yeah, it's kind of like if they had messed up that movie, no one would have cared. Everyone would have been like, whatever. But you mess up Spider-Man, you mess up X-Men, you mess up some of those big guys back then, and you're in trouble, or you're ruining your chance to make any future movies. Because that movie, the studios don't want to work with you anymore. So
the big budgets, being able to throw money at it too, and being able to actually you go back and look at the original movies, Iron Man 1, 2,
it'd be interesting to check what the Iron Man budget was. I don't even know. I'm gonna check right now.
There a lot of it was just like explosions and that kind of VFX versus like his suit, obviously VFX, but it's a very easy, I think, suit to do. It's not like it's metallic. I feel like that's a lot easier of a order for VFX department to do that.
I think they did it for 140 million, which I'm actually surprised they gave them that much. I'm gonna be honest. Really honest. Surprised that they gave All Happy $140 million to make that movie. But
yeah. Well, I know that's one thing people struggle with like Thor 1. These movies, like Thor 1 had a lot smaller of a budget, which is weird to me. Maybe because he's also a smaller character and they were trying to play it a little safe. But like they set it in like a tiny town in the middle of, where was it, Arizona or something like that?
Yes.
They hardly showed Asgard much at all or anything like that, and so
down for that price.
Yep, they kept it down. So yeah, I agree. Scarlett Johansson was a super inspired choice for that. Like she embodied that character.
They did those little. It's like they threw in these little things, but no commitment to it. It was like, well, we'll throw this in there, and if it takes off, that's what I mean. Like I just think Feige, like he really did some inspired producing back then. Like I think he was firing on all cylinders as a producer and made some really smart choices and was like, yeah, let's bring in this guy. If it works out, we could have a hit on our hands. And then obviously rolled along Avengers, which just like blew everybody's minds. I think that movie, like I can't even say how many comic nerds and huge, Marvel fanboys I've talked to that Avengers is looked at and is like, this is like literally felt like the comics, like on screen, like more than any other thing. And so Joss really, that was Joss, right? I think Joss Whedon did Avengers.
Yeah, Whedon did Avengers 1. Yeah.
And so like, that's quite the feat to do that. And I still, that's such a great movie, and it has so many moments that you're like, this feels like it was pulled from a comic book frame.
Yeah, obviously, like the money shot that they always use, where it's like going around the whole group, and like that. All those shots, all those things. Like when you're reading an Avengers comic, it's there, which is just so cool. But I think even in the Infinity Saga, like there were still misses too. Like Avengers 2 is pretty, like it's okay, but like if you go back and watch that movie, it's not the best. Like it's got some cool stuff in it, but like, and it has big ramifications. But it kind of
I think the script struggled on that one. Because there were so many things in that movie that are, I think, intriguing premise-wise. Like the idea of like raising a city up and then turning it into a meteor, like that's a really freaking awesome idea.
Yeah.
And also, Ultron himself is very fascinating, like as a villain, which is proven even now as they've gone back with What If and brought him back as like this villain. He's an intriguing villain. And I agree. Spader was an amazing Ultron.
I was gonna say he was another. Just like like actor after actor, just like every single one of them was just perfect. I mean, Jeremy Renner, Scarlett Johansson, Chris Evans, Chris Pratt, who's the other Chris?
Hemsworth.
Huh? Hemsworth. There we go. 3 Chris's. Like, let's just go with Chris's. It's cool. But like every single one of them, and even the side characters. What's his name? Who plays Agent Coulson?
Oh man, why am I blanking out on his name?
Yeah.
What's up, Justin?
Yeah. Oh,
Justin, buddy of mine.
What's going on, Justin?
It's a good point. I mean, so many things do stem from. I mean, I think they used all the Avengers movies. Really, I mean, they culminated in massive storylines, but they also launched. That was the brilliance of the series, is they launched all these new storylines, all these new things happening. Yeah, it set up so many of the films that were going to come in the subsequent phases. And so, and I just don't, the general public may not understand how hard that is to do. So hard to be we're going to do this massive movie that's wrapping up all these storylines, but then we're also going to launch new storylines in that said movie for the next 3 years. The amount of brain power and foresight to look ahead in terms of just story structure and construction of a saga like that, it really is. It's incredible, and it makes me sometimes I love a lot of the filmmakers out there, but the whole thing with Scorsese this past year, right?
Thank you,
Clark Gregg. There we go. Thank you, Justin. Thanos was right.
He was.
Thanos was right. But if you look at the films and all that they did, I don't know, it blows my mind that there's filmmakers out there like Scorsese, who I really do respect, that are oh, this isn't movies or this isn't cinema. And it's just I feel like that's a little bit short-sighted, because if you really start to think about the amount of crafting that went into these things, it's pretty insane. It really is insane.
Well, I mean, you literally still make movies. That's your job.
I do.
So how difficult it is just to craft a single one movie, short story, feature length, whatever. How difficult it is just to craft a solid narrative for one single contained movie. You look at then, okay, we're going to do a trilogy. That's pretty stinking dicey. I mean, you look at, House of Mouse, they own, Lucasfilm, and you look at, the Ray trilogy, whatever you want to call it, episodes 7, 8, 9.
Saga, they're calling it now.
Yeah, the end of it. You look at that and it's well, there's really cool parts of it. There's really good. People argue all day, every day for their lives about, whether those are good or terrible or whatever. But whichever way you fall, you have to admit, even with that, it's got some major plot holes, major issues in the storytelling. And that's just that's 3 movies. They're tailing into the whole other, universe of, Star Wars. But that's a massive, it's the same group, it's just House of Mouse owns them too. And, you look at the fumble of the ball of that, and then you look at Infinity Saga and how many movies is that? It's 20 some.
It's so 20, many. It's
23 or something like that. I don't know, but so many movies, and they're not only are they adding to the story, introducing new storylines, but they're doing completely new character introductions while tying them in, and then bringing all the new technology or lore from Wakanda and Black Panther to just, you got Thor, and then you have Guardians of the Galaxy. It's just crazy how many groups they're able to bring in and still tell a relatively cohesive storyline.
Totally.
And only, mildly, or, fumble the ball once in a while. Iron Man 3's not great. Thor 2's not great. Like I think Thor 2 gets
Thor,
panned pretty hard on, and I think it's better than people
I do
say.
think it is better than people say. Actually, I just think Thor 2. I think that because the shift from Thor 1 to Thor 2 is quite a genre shift. Like it really was. Like Thor 1 was fairly lighthearted and funny, and I know just from being around in the editing bay on that whole thing is like there was a desire with that film, and you can see this too if you go back. I don't even know if you can see the old Avengers Assembled episodes that are on Disney Plus. I know that they kind of talked about this, I think, at some point. But like they really, because Thor was like this, how he spoke and like all these different things. That's good. That they went fairly lighthearted with Thor, like purposely. But then if you look at Thor 2, all of a sudden it was like, this is dark and gritty and like really intense, which there are aspects of that in the Thor comics. But I think for audiences, they struggled with that, which is funny because then you see them come back and do Thor Ragnarok, which again is super funny.
Well, yeah, really, I mean, it's like funny, and then it goes way down to like, or not way down, but then drops down pretty far to pretty serious. And then Ragnarok jumps way up to like near slapstick, but rides that line, I think, personally. Like Ragnarok's one of my absolute favorite MCU movies, I think. At least for rewatchability. If we're talking rewatchability, Ragnarok, Guardians of the Galaxy 1, and then like Captain America Civil War. Like hot dang. Those three are probably the most rewatchable. But
yeah, so I mean,
but like you were saying, sorry, with the tone and kind of like what they were going for, and then you get Thor 4, which everyone's like, what happened? And I think what happened is they did Thor 3 and Thor 2. Well, hardcore Thor 2. They had two separate genres of movies going on in Thor 4. They had a like near horror level, like multiverse of madness type horror. Yes. And then they also had Ragnarok slapstick amped up a bit too. So they had these two movies on completely different ends of the spectrum, and they did not ride any line. And it would go from like one scene, like kids scared, thinking they're all going to be murdered. And then all of a sudden it's like, here comes Mjolnir, all jealous. And you're like, no, now is not the time for a joke.
I love Taika. I love Taika so much, but I agree. I just think like, the whole Gore the God Butcher storyline, the comics is so good. Like it's so good. It's an insanely good comic story. They should have just done that, and then let Taika do, the Jane storyline. I think they could have been two separate movies completely. And so that's what's interesting about it. It's like they should have just had Taika do the Jane story, and then gone and grabbed like some new, Inarritu or Villeneuve or somebody.
Who did Multiverse? Who did Multiverse of Madness?
Raimi. Get Raimi to do it.
Have Raimi do God Butcher. Like that would have been pretty good. God Butcher is one of my absolute favorite Marvel storylines. Like so good.
It's so good. High rereadability as well. Like that story is so good. But maybe we should just jump in, and I mean, you've already kind of mentioned a little bit. Maybe we should jump in and share like what are our favorite MCU movies, because you've kind of mentioned a few, and Justin Gibbons and Hodgins are in here saying theirs as well. So should we jump in and drop our top 5?
Ooh, okay.
Do you know your top 5?
Okay, so, hold on. Who was it? Someone mentioned Blade movie. I think this is going to happen. I
think it's happening.
Huh?
I think it's happening.
Yeah, I think it's happening. It's, having some trouble, but like, they're not scared to do horror. Blade
is great. He's a good actor. Like, I still see it happening. I see it. Yeah. I see it coming through.
It might be delayed. There's, reassessing. Hopefully it doesn't get too deep into like development hell, but we'll see what happens.
That's always an option in Hollywood. That's always you're always afraid of that. at all times, because someone could come along and make a terrible decision and just be like, I'm not sure about this. And as soon as somebody high up says, I'm not sure about this, you are in trouble. And
Yep.
it's not good. You don't want
It
that
has
to happen.
begun.
It has begun. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk our top 5. So I don't even have my list, like an actual list, but well, if I made a list anyways, it would just fluctuate constantly depending on my mood. So I'm very fickle like that. So okay, let's just toss one out there. One of your top 5 movies.
Okay, so I think one of my top 5 is there's a lot of classics that a lot of people say, so I'm going to go with one that isn't normally mentioned as much, and I would say it's 5 right now, and that's the OG Ant-Man.
That's a solid pick, dude. That is a very solid pick.
And I think it's because I love Paul Rudd in that movie. I think I tend to like the lightheartedness of the MCU a little bit more than maybe most. And I just think like the collection, I think Quantumania failed because they lost the team. Like Ant-Man was the original team of him and those weird buddies of his, like Michael Pena.
Dude. Well, and the fact that they haven't done the like every Marvel movie just starts with a recap by him is like a travesty. That man, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that'd be my 5 right now. And that's a fairly recent thing, but I found myself, the only way I'll wrap up this one by just saying what you said earlier is the reason this one has eked its way into my top 5 is that it's one of the highest rewatchabilities for me in all of the MCU. Like I can just see Ant-Man on TV and I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm watching this.
I'm down. That's totally. It's true. I always forget about Ant-Man, which is kind of like, I mean, fitting for him.
Yeah.
Just forgotten. But yeah, because when I make my list, it's not necessarily always like, this has the best cinematography. This has the best acting even or directing. It's like, this is the most like, which I mean, a lot of that does fall into these movies because that helps, but the rewatchability is just like, that is kind of my main thing, because that's what these movies are. They're supposed to be fun, having a blast, and if it's not rewatchable, that probably means it's not like fitting that bill necessarily.
Totally.
So okay, so I guess oh man, I'm looking at the list too, just trying to like, I know what my top 5, just what I'd say, but I want to make sure. I think I'd probably put Black Panther.
Ooh, good choice.
It did a lot of new stuff. I still listen to that soundtrack all the time.
Yes.
Like, I friggin' love that soundtrack.
Yes.
Like, you know, acting on all parts of that movie were great. It was just a completely new and different, like it's on Earth, but like different universe. Just that, what do they call it? Afrofuturism, just of Wakanda. So freaking cool. And I mean, even that movie struggled with like VFX, like rubber band man type jumping around, but still like pretty dang cool. Yeah, Wakanda Forever was also pretty good. It was just really hard to watch because like you know he's not there, and it starts on such a downer.
I think that's another thing with Black Panther is just Chadwick, like like the gravitas he brought to the role, like another perfect casting. And so I mean, I agree with you that it's definitely up there. It's Gibbons. I knew Black Panther was in Gibbons' top 5 for sure.
Ooh, yeah, I need to get some ice cream after this live stream. That's for sure.
You know, the guy that did the soundtrack for Black Panther is that guy Ludwig Göransson, and he's done that guy's on a tear right now in the composing world. He did Mandalorian, which is also highly iconic now.
Yeah. Oh man.
So he just has that. He's really good at that futurism, really unique sounds with like
Mhm.
weird. He uses like all these weird, like huge flutes and like
Mhm.
weird, interesting things. And so that's a clutch pick with the soundtrack for Black Panther.
Yeah. So this is why Black Panther is has one of the best villains, is because like this is when you go, okay, it's a good villain is one that you agree with their sentiment,
Mm.
but you disagree with how they go about doing it.
Totally.
Like that's why they're the bad guys, not because of what they thought or their, their theos or whatever you want to call it, but because of how they go about doing it. And I think that makes Killmonger one of the best villains out there.
I would agree.
And I would not be. I was really hoping that they were going to use the multiverse to bring, like my fan theory. No, sorry, no. Sidebarring, like trailing off. But
You're good.
my hope was that Multiverse of Madness was going to. Doctor Strange was going to travel the multiverses, and that's where Miles was going to get picked up because there was going to be an incursion event and that his universe was going to die, which is, spoiler for the comics. That's how he gets brought into the 616. And then, so Miles would be brought in. And then also I was really hoping that there would be a universe where Killmonger had grown up in Wakanda.
Okay, yeah.
And he was Black Panther in his universe, and his universe also had an incursion event, and he gets brought over to the 616, but he's good, and he loves all of, Black Panther T'Challa's family, but they all hate him because he's, a bad guy in their eyes. I was like, that would have been such a cool dynamic where he loves them, but they can't trust him. He's the one, that killed all the, it would have been and then have him like Shuri, she was a great Black Panther, she is, but I think that would have been such a cool dynamic. Or for her to start off, she is Black Panther and she's going, and then she, is she going to let go of the mantle and give it to Killmonger, who is like,
oh man,
like that would have been a really cool dynamic.
Anyways, cool. I mean, I think that fan theory is not thrown out yet. Like, I think
it could still happen.
It could still happen. I mean, there's been talks still of this idea of like when the Fantastic Four come in, and everyone thinks right now that because it's in the 60s and where it's on a different planet, a different Earth, that what's going to happen in that is that it's going to be a reset. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of talks. Justin Gibbons in the chat right now, and I were talking and just mentioning that a lot of people are saying Wolverine and Deadpool is going to be a bit of a reset for the universe as well, of like kind of resetting and getting things set up. So I do think they're getting ready for a hard reset. Whether it will be successful or not, who knows? But
yeah, I hope they take their time. I hope it's a slow burn, because that is, in my opinion, the only way that they're going to be able to do this.
Agreed.
Just like,
Agreed.
Don't rush it. Take your sweet time.
Right.
Okay. So Black Panther.
Okay.
You said I'm gonna. Ant-Man
was my first vote. My second one, and it does change a lot, but we've already mentioned it. But I think I'm gonna put it here because I do really love it, and that is Thor Ragnarok. Just because I love Taika. There's a lot of people that didn't like the movie. And it's not necessarily the strongest in terms of like overall story, but I just love Thor's journey in that movie. And I just think the dynamic, and it's the closest we ever get to a Hulk movie as well, in terms of like a Mark Ruffalo Hulk movie. And so I love all of that. I love Valkyrie. Like Tessa, like just so many good moments in that movie. And Taika playing, Korg was amazing.
Oh, dude, he's so good.
He's one of my still to this day, there are plenty of moments where I just start talking like Cord to friends,
Yeah.
and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, nothing, man, just hanging out, just hanging out here, you know, piss off, ghost, you know. I don't know if I can say that on YouTube.
So no, you're good. You're good.
But yeah, I love all of that, and so Thor Ragnarok for me for number 4.
That's such a solid pick. Spoiler, that'll be near my top.
We're gonna circle back on that one.
Yeah, we'll circle back. We'll circle back. So I think number 4 for me would be, it was mentioned in chat actually, Benedict Cucumber, Doctor Strange.
Yes, okay.
I really liked that one just because it's also an origin story. Like he's actually got a very similar kind of origin story to Iron Man. But it's just so good, and Benedict just plays him off so well, and it's just such an interesting concept, and it introduces the whole you have science, and then you have like kind of mysticism, and now you have like this mysticism magic type thing going on, and it's so cool, and
Totally.
like it's got this grand world, and the visuals in that movie are just bonkers. Just like when the buildings are folding in on each other, and oh man,
Yeah, the
so
stylistic choices in that movie were awesome.
Yeah, super cool. So
they definitely got some Inception vibes in that movie for sure.
I mean, going from Inception, I mean, what, a couple years,
years after that. So
yeah, and then you had that. You're like, I think I see
significantly inspired here,
yeah.
But we'll take it. It. But
so,
that's good. Okay, so number 3 for me,
Wong is awesome. Can't go wrong with Wong.
Who's Wong with now? Who's that girl? I'm blanking now. That was really funny. Didn't necessarily love that movie, but that whole thing with Wong and his girlfriend, or I guess they don't really call her his girlfriend, but it's definitely insinuated.
Yeah.
So great.
Oh man, I can't
It'll
remember.
come to me. It'll come to me. Or chat will Madison. Yes.
Which movie was it?
Wong and Madison. Oh, it was in the shows. It was like kind of brought in some of the shows.
Okay.
And I mean, yeah,
it's so good,
so funny. So number 3,
mm-hmm.
She-Hulk. That's it. That's
right. Oh, was it she? Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah.
Oh, that'll go down a whole trail. I did not like She-Hulk, but I will say there were some moments in She-Hulk that were fun. For sure.
So I will say, like, She-Hulk was like, that was ripped out of that was how She-Hulk is in the comics. Like, pretty true to the comics, at least a bunch of them. So I'm like it or hate it, like, they did a pretty good job interpreting it and bringing it to the screen.
I've never read, so
I did enjoy. Oh, that's right, Madison and Wong. Oh, that's right.
Madison show.
I did enjoy it overall, and I thought it was hilarious. The like self-referential ending to the whole thing. It was weird. I was like, do I hate this? Do I love it? I'm like, well, if I can't decide if I hated it or loved it, I'm like, good on you guys. You took a risk.
Good on you, writer's room. That's right.
Oh man.
She-Hulk.
Okay.
All right.
What was your
number 3? Number 3, mentioned it before, and that is Iron Man 1. I just think
that's where I was going to make my Iron Man 1 is 3 too.
Oh, so we could share it. We can share it together. I just, there's something about that movie. It is truly nostalgic for me now, which is weird because it doesn't old enough to be nostalgic, but it just is. Like it's one of those movies now I can pop in anytime and watch it and love it and enjoy every single moment. And so and it's funny too, because we earlier you were talking about the armor. It's weird with movies like that where you watch it and you're like, how does the CG look better in this movie than like half the movies they're doing nowadays.
The
CG work is so solid in that movie, and so so many things about the movie are great. I do think he got sold short, but I do like Obadiah Stane, and like I loved him as a villain.
Mm-hmm.
I wish
I was just thinking about bringing.
I wish the third act was a little stronger with him, but I think Jeff just brought it in that thing. Like just that scene with him and Tony in Tony's house
when he pulls it out and
when he pulls it out, and just that whole, you were like, ooh, this guy is evil. Like it was such a good reveal, and like how they did it. So I love that movie.
I totally agree. Awesome soundtrack.
Yes. Soundtrack's so good.
Well, I think what also helps with these movies to make them last, so when you brought it up, you're like, man, it feels weird that that's a nostalgic movie. It was 2008, so it was the year before we met in college.
So
like
crazy.
Which is weird that movie was out before we went to LA. That throws me. I was like, I feel like that was after I graduated, but no. So Iron Man 2 was right after. But yes, the soundtrack, like, okay, so I was saying is the soundtrack when they do like Thor, Love and Thunder, or Ragnarok, not Love and Thunder, Thor Ragnarok and Iron Man, like doing these like classic 80s music type. Oh, come on, really? Doing these like classic 80s, or not even 80s, but just like the classics, and putting them in there and letting those, like, it doesn't date your movie as much if you're using a classic like that everyone kind of loves and really drives it. So it's, I think it was so good. It's just so good. Like, I remember the trailer for that movie coming out, and that song kicking in. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
just
I can like see the whole opening scene. I've seen it so many times. So like as soon as I start hearing that music, I can see the scene with the soldiers playing out. Like,
yep,
it's so good.
It's awesome.
So old.
It's just so good.
I'm the first Avenger. It's great. Oh man. Okay. So we shared Iron Man for 3. Number 2 for me is going to be very familiar, so my 1 is going to be a shock. My number 2 is Winter Soldier. So good. Probably the best action, like just straight action of the entire saga. Like in terms of fight scenes, pacing, like that movie is just so solid and strong in every, like the script is so tight on that. Like there is not one moment, you are never bored in that movie, ever, not once. Like, and so
you said Winter Soldier, right?
Winter Soldier, yeah.
Okay.
Soldier, yeah.
I was second guessing. I was gaslighting myself over here. I was like,
no. Winter Soldier, yes. I mean, I can talk about that movie forever, and I just think it was so perfectly done. That movie was perfectly done, and will go down as maybe one of the best superhero movies ever. So.
Yeah. So we're talking about like what makes a good villain in a movie, and one, like, you know, spoiler, his best friend, you know, Bucky coming back and being the Winter Soldier, like that was beautiful, that was amazing, and you know, acting and all that. And I still, one of my favorite fight scenes of all time was that knife scene, that knife fight.
Yes.
Where like he's like dropping the knife and catching it, and like they're just doing all this like hand to hand. It's so cool. There's no like crazy VFX. It was all, they did that, which was like super cool.
Born Ultimatum style, just like raw fighting.
Yeah, and it was so cool to see that. And then what I like, there's people who are the villains in that movie and all that, but really like it was a movie that asked a really good question, which was like that, you know, do you want safety or do you want freedom? And like, if you want a lot of safety, you can't have a lot of freedom.
pretty relevant question today.
Yeah,
Still.
yeah. I mean, it's a relevant question all the time. Like anytime when there's like, stress in the world or whatever, and so it asked a really good question that didn't, like that's relevant and especially at that time really hit home.
Yeah.
When did it come out? It was 2014. So it was like, yeah. So people are just, it was such a good, so good. I friggin' love that one. Definitely high up there on the rewatchability too.
Totally. Never trust them.
Yeah. Never. Yeah, good life. Yeah. Okay. I feel like you really want us to talk about Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck.
I've seen it mentioned more than a few times in here.
Have you do you play the there's like the game that's like a movie frame. Have you heard about it? I'm trying to remember and you have to guess guess the movie by the movie frame. And you have 5 guesses. It's almost like Wordle but with movies.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I played it a little bit, not a ton.
Howard the Duck just popped up this past week. And I just thought it was hilarious that they put that on there.
I do love that they brought him back into the universe and he's just like hanging out, chilling, having his drink, and just like wisecracking. It's a good, totally. It's good, just kind of side character. That question is wrapped up in Capsulum with his friend. It's not safe risking his life and career for this villain friend, but also true freedom to liberate. Yeah, it's such a good. It's
making me want to go
movie.
Watch it.
Yeah, now I kind of want to go back and rewatch it again.
So
DeVito would make a good Howard. He's Penguin. You can't make him.
Can't cross over right now.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right, man. What's your number 2? Was it Winter Soldier or?
So my problem is I kind of backed myself in the corner.
Yeah.
So.
That's how it always happens.
Yeah. So. It would be Winter Soldier, but since we just talked about that, I'm just going to say that would be my honorary mention.
You can do the honorary mention and sub in. You can sub in something.
So, my number 2 would be Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 1, which, again, soundtrack.
Yeah.
So good. So good.
Incredible.
But also just like a really cool, like the villain wasn't great, it was just, he's a bad guy wanting to do bad things, cool, whatever, but it opened up the whole universe, like I liked Doctor Strange because it like opened up the whole world to like magic, but Guardians like opened up the whole universe, like added all these different planets and cultures. Like Thor did that too a little bit, but like added a lot more.
And some would say Guardians. I mean, obviously Ronan is the villain, right?
Yeah.
But some would say that the villain is the team trying to come together, like the opposition of this idea of this group of misfits. Like that's the antagonist in that movie, is that they can't seem to really mesh well, and it's a mess, and they're trying to fit together into this unlikely team.
Yeah, that I was gonna say, like the villain's, okay, he's a big bad guy. It kind of like shoehorns into Thanos at that point, like with Ronan, being Thanos's kind of lieutenant or whatever. But yeah, where they're having to overcome their own issues. That's the big thing that they have to overcome, is their own personal issues and interpersonal issues and all that, which is just a lot of times more interesting to watch than just like, oh, fight a bad guy. So it kind of gets that. If they had like a really good, like interesting bad guy, it might have actually been too much for the movie.
It's true.
Because like watching them struggle interpersonally and personally with each other and all that, and then also having like to share screen with this like awesome villain, that might have been too much. So
man.
But yeah, the music, so good.
So good.
Rocket is my second favorite rabbit to Usagi Yojimbo.
Usagi, I was like, your first favorite.
But I think the effects in that movie were beautiful. Like Groot looks amazing. Rocket's animation is super good. What's his name that does Rocket's voice?
Bradley Cooper. Yeah.
Cooper. There it is. Yeah. Like does a really good job.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of funny. Vin Diesel does Groot, but like, I mean, for what he has, he does a pretty good job with it and has fun, which is cool.
It's so good.
Yeah, but I thought that was a really that's super high up on my rewatchability.
Totally,
a ton of fun.
And since you said it, I have to say that is my number one. That is my number one.
Okay, that's a good jump.
It's up there.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been my number one for a really long time for all the reasons we've mentioned, and I think that Guardians came in, and this is a good seg. Or I mean, you got to share your number one, but I was just saying this idea of like Guardians. Why I love Guardians so much is because it was a movie that had so much heart, and it was like about these people who are trying to work together, and they find themselves to be a family, and they're all unique, and they all have their problems and their things that makes them not necessarily likable. They have things that make them likable, things that make them unlikable. And so I thought they just meshed all those character arcs. Like the idea of taking 5 different characters and meshing them all together like that, it's really hard to do, and they did it so well. And I do think that Chris Pratt was like perfectly cast as Star-Lord. And I have an insider story of that too, because when they were writing my inside days at Marvel, when they were writing Guardians of the Galaxy, the initial script for that movie, it was way more of a Star Wars-esque script, like kind of space adventure, and a lot more action and a lot more just like space drama, and that's like, because like everyone Star Wars is based off of the Odyssey, and like so it just had a more of that type feel. And then Gunn came in, and then he brought Pratt in, and the movie just changed completely. Like the movie changed into this just comedy and just being so funny. And I think that Guardians just so mastered that witty, smart, perfectly timed comedy along with heart. And so and I do believe it has maybe the highest rewatchability in the entire MCU. Like you can watch it over and over again, and it's so fun. Yeah.
So my number one we've already talked about was Ragnarok.
Yes.
So it's so good. I have always been a sucker for like 80s music and just like ballads and neon colors. And if you go to my channel or any of my socials, like it's all like neon green and like neon and just like
you like the Funkos, right? The neon
the black light Funkos, like
Funko guys.
Which I sold off. So I traded in for in-store credit. I have like 6 Funkos left.
Oh my
and they're
goodness.
Like the Rocketeer and a Batman Beyond. And I got rid of them. I needed to make space and they needed to go. So sadly, I loved those black light pops.
End of an era.
Yeah, that was my COVID collecting random pickup binge. But it was kind of because I saw that black light Thor Funko, but like it reminded me of Ragnarok.
Yeah.
And freaking love that movie. Just it's got that buddy cop feel with Hulk and Thor. And then you have Valkyrie in there. That's such a good deep character. That's just like she's deep. She's got a lot going on with her. She's got PTSD and struggling, and like with alcohol and all that, and like overcoming, you know, like her demons, and then you got just like these other two guys dealing with a lot too. Oh man, it's so good and super high up on rewatchability. I think Guardians probably has it for rewatchability. Like if I'm gonna just turn on something fun to watch that I, you know, want to just have in the background while I'm like plugging away on some work, it's gonna be Guardians more than likely. But I freaking loved Ragnarok. So
good. And it has maybe the most famous, like the most famous trailer moment of the entire MCU of like, we're friends from work.
oh
like,
man,
that,
it's
like I remember that in the trailer and just being like, oh, this is going to be absolutely delightful.
yeah,
Like
just
seeing that moment.
so much fun.
So good.
Oh man. And then I mean it's got those moments where he's just like that and he like hits the hammer and he's just like lighting up, and oh, it's so good.
Taika was in his full stride then. Stride of just, he owned it. He did such a good job.
It was awesome. So okay, so do you have I kind of tossed in a special mention. Do you have one you wanted to throw in that comes to mind?
Honorable mention. I mean,
yeah.
There's so many.
I know, it's hard to pick.
It's hard to pick. And I also, it's funny because I'm sure there's going to be people that watch this and they'll be like, neither of them picked Infinity War or Endgame.
Or Spider-Man Homecoming.
I put Infinity War and Endgame just in a whole separate category, really, and on their own, because of what they are and what they did. And it's almost impossible to separate them, really. Like, they really are their own thing.
It's one movie. It was super long and they had to split it.
It's probably one giant movie. Thor, not going to be Thor Dark World.
I think you should put that as your honorable.
I think an honorable mention that might shock people, because I think a lot of people didn't like it because of how much the first one was beloved, but was Guardians 2 might be my honorable mention. Because Guardians 2 is really interesting. It's grown on me a lot over the past several years, where I had fun with it when I first saw it, but I was like, oh, it's not even nearly as good as the first one, which is true. But I think that I've gone back and watched it, and I've really grown to truly love it. Like I do like it, and I like a lot of the character arcs and storylines that they went with that, because, you know, just the absent father storyline and all of that going on, and then paired up with Yondu, and like that idea of that parallel storyline that they did was good. It was just so good, and I really
what is a real who was his real father?
Yeah, it's like who is, and like what makes a good dad? Like, because Yondu's not necessarily a great dad.
Yeah, he's definitely flawed.
But flawed dad. But it's like, so it's just, I liked what they did there, and it's just another one that I just enjoy the characters so much that it's something I can go back to. Hodgins saying G3 was cringy. Guardians 3, I liked it, but I actually think for me it was the weakest of the series. Like, I did still enjoy it a lot. I like the other two better.
Yeah.
So
I like, off the cuff, like if someone says like list the order of Guardians in their best to worst, I would automatically go Guardians 1, 3, and then 2. But like really actually thinking about it, and I have actually stopped and thought about this a lot more, but I've thought about this a couple times lately where I was just like, I think I'm kind of with you on 2 being a pretty strong like entry into the Guardians universe, in that like, yeah, it had that really good, like, what makes a good is an absent father better than a present father who's flawed? Or, I mean, the absent father's obviously pretty flawed too, but
it's my reality right now too. It's been my reality and yours as well for
a little bit. It's
10 years, right? It's like I have a 10, 8, 6, and 3 now, and so my reality is fatherhood. It's like, fatherhood, and how am I navigating this? Am I being a good dad most of the time? And it's like, so that probably plays heavily into my enjoyment of 2, because it like challenges me to think about that space and just think about myself as a father. So I like it.
Speaking of which, I'm hearing 2 of my kids upstairs whispering right now. So
they're up pretty late.
Go to bed.
Are they out of school now? Are your kids out of school?
Well, it's a long weekend, but no, they have, my youngest has school next week, and then she's done, and my other 2 have like 2 weeks after that, so they have like 3 weeks left. So
nice. Yeah, my kids have 2 more days, and then it's so weird. 2 days next week, and then they're done. So
2 days left. That's crazy. Dang. Yeah, I don't know if 3 was cringy to me. Looking at Guardians 3, like I think it was a cool exploration of like Rocket. But I also think it struggled with, they had to make a whole movie to bring in Kang and make him like a super villain. But it just didn't work. It was like Quantumania. It was like they split up the team, and then they tried to make Kang this villain, and then Guardians 3, they kind of split up the gang again because, you know, Rocket was just like out of the thing the whole time. Yeah. And then they went for Kang as the villain. And obviously that didn't work out with the actor, but
man, what a mess. What a mess. Yeah. I mean, I do think the reason Guardians 3, I have it as well, is that it's weird to me that they made Rocket the main character.
Because that was a strange turn.
It was interesting. It wasn't bad. It just was a weird turn to be like, because it's almost like we ended the Guardians on this flavor of like Rocket was the true Guardian, like but that's not really what it is. It's like Star-Lord, it's the Guardian. He's the captain, and he's the main guy in 1 and 2. And then we almost like shift away from him and to Rocket for the whole time. And so it just was interesting. It wasn't bad. It just, I thought it was a little bit, it was weirdly presented like in order wise. Like you would almost think that like that would have been done on 2.
Yeah.
Or something. So I don't know. It was interesting. I need to go back and watch it again. I've only watched Guardians 3 twice. Which is actually fairly low for me for an MCU movie. I typically watch them a lot more than that, so I need to go back and take another rewatch. And
I think I've done Guardians 3 2 times also. Kang was. I will say like Kang was a really good. Did you watch Loki?
I watched Loki.
Yeah, like Kang was a really good villain in Loki season 1, and season 2 is pretty stinking solid for Kang. Like I'll say what you will about the actor outside of, you know, his personal life or whatever. Yeah. Barring all that, like separating the art from the artist, you know, whatever. But like he is a pretty dang good actor.
Oh yeah.
He had to play characters, and he did a pretty good job. And I thought he was really good in Loki. But then seeing just like,
gonna see him again, man.
No. So now we got Galactus. So maybe Galactus like ate Kang. I don't know how they're gonna do this.
It's just sad. I'm like, man, why'd you have to be a terrible person?
Come on.
It's like he just was so good. He was. I agree with you. All I'm saying is like, I agree. He was another one where you felt a little bit of the magic because he was so perfectly cast, and you were like, ooh, like that's how I felt. That's how I felt with the MCU right now. It's like I didn't love Phase 4 really at all, other than Loki. Like I did like Loki, and I think again it's connected to this idea, that like Tom Hiddleston is Loki. It's like he just embodies that character.
Owen Wilson, I thought that was a terrible casting choice. I was like, no, it's not going to happen. But he was so freaking good in that one too.
So good. He was so good. So, I said that kind of like Owen Wilson would say that.
Oh, Rad, all right. Oh wait, that's not Owen Wilson.
I liked. Yeah, I liked Loki. I liked Loki season 2. I'm curious to see where they go with it. I'm curious to see what they do. So
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, it's a relatively new one, and not everyone might have watched that series yet. But like how it ended, I'll be very interested to see where this goes, if it goes anywhere,
if it goes,
or if they just, or if they just let it go, and that's that, which would work too. Because that's also kind of sad if they just never acknowledge it again. That's like pretty rough. Like, oh man, like,
oh yeah, it would be like, rough. But I mean, they could.
But that's kind of cool. Like, oh, this thing's just there, and just always looming, but you never even acknowledge it. Like,
I think they'll wrap. I think they'll bring it back just because. I mean, they have no plans of stopping making these movies. I don't know if you've seen the lineup. Obviously, they pared down a lot where they're like, we're only going to make 3 a year, like that type of mindset. But it's like,
so I'm looking at, so I have Wikipedia for whatever that's worth.
Oh, okay,
so, so we just had, last one was Marvels, which, then you have so this is phase 5. So we have Deadpool and Wolverine, Captain America, Brave New World, and then Thunderbolts.
I'm excited about Brave New World.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting.
I'm really excited about Thunderbolts. It could surprise me though.
Yeah,
that's it could, this. You never know.
You never know at this point. So
be the next Guardians.
Yeah, and then phase 6.
I don't know if you remember that, but like when Guardians was coming out, everybody was like, "What is?"
Yeah, this? Like why? Like I was just pumped because it looked funny.
So I mean, there could still be a Guardians out there.
Yeah. So. Phase 6 is Fantastic Four, Blade, Avengers 5, and Avengers Secret Wars, I guess. Which seems interesting with the whole Secret Wars
the TV show. Did you like the show?
Yeah, it was okay.
Oh,
I wanted to like it more than I actually liked it, but
I thought from a filmmaker. From a storyteller, filmmaker standpoint, that show was a mess. Like half the episodes, I was like, what? I was like, this doesn't make. There were so many times where I was like watching it, and I was thinking to myself, "Am I missing something? Like, is something off that I just am completely missing?" And
well, they tried to make it so like interesting and like deep and like, oh, all this interplay, and you're like, it's just kind of comes down to like they can morph and are just kind of like terrorists and are mad, and so I understand why they're mad, which is a good thing for the villain to have, is like relatability. Like I can understand that, but it's not really the super deep espionage spy twists and turns. There's no twists and turns in it. It's just kind of like Nick Fury flailing around and feeling old.
Yeah, and feeling old. And I still stand
which
by
I can relate to.
I think that Nick Fury in that show didn't feel like Nick Fury. Like,
yeah.
Same with.
Well, I will admit they did kind of play on that. Like,
they did.
He's not the same since he came back after the snap. But
yes, they did. They did.
But still,
I don't know if I loved it.
It
I
almost
didn't
seemed
love that aspect of it.
Yeah, it almost seemed like he was just kind of. I don't want to say phoning it in, but he was like distracted or something.
Distracted is a great.
Yeah.
Yeah, distracted is a great word, I think, for Samuel L. on that role. He just felt distracted for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about top 5, a couple of honorable mentions. Let's kind of wrap it with like a not on a downer, but what was the one that really absolutely missed the mark for you?
Of MCU?
Yeah, of the MCU.
Oh,
let's not do a show because shows are pretty.
The shows are rough, so yeah. I mean that's hard. Okay, I already know what mine is.
Okay.
And I know there's people out there that disagree. and I know why they disagree, but I very much disliked. I'm just gonna go with the Infinity Saga since we've been talking about it so much. I'm just gonna stick with that. But my least favorite in that was Iron Man 3. I did not like Iron Man 3, and I think mostly because they're like, it's Iron Man 3, but really it was like they could have called the movie Tony Stark 1. Like, it wasn't, Iron Man's barely in it. It's like this deconstruction of the Iron Man character, which is intriguing to it. Like, in your head, you're like, oh, that's intriguing. That feels artsy and really interesting. That movie was so boring to me. I did not like 3. Yeah. I disliked everything they basically did in that movie. So yeah, that's probably my lowest of the low, really, that really is my least favorite. Pretty significantly my least favorite.
You kind of convinced me off of what I was gonna say. I'm mad about that movie because they had such a cool concept, like you're saying, where they there's a deconstruction of that character. And I remember seeing Cena, and like he's got his hood up at one point, and he's just like walking through the streets, and he's like, it's like, oh, so he's now, instead of now being wrapped in his armor and his suit, his armor now is like a hoodie, which is about as like low tech as it possibly gets. And then like when he goes and has to like break into the facility at the end, like he does like all these makeshift weapons, which is really cool. Like he's like kind of going back to like a very stripped down MacGyver type situation, but man, is it just like boring and kind of just like kind of dumb. Like, okay, like cool, like the Extremis thing is interesting, but like not done well, and you just kind of get boring. I was really Hodgins, I was really hoping the kid was gonna be the new Iron Man, like after Stark dies at the end of Infinity War. Like I'm like they could have brought him back and made him.
He was in that final scene at
I know
at Tony's funeral.
Yeah, and then just now, I mean, they have Ironheart, which is sort of interesting, but like I understand like bringing in characters and diversity and all that, but like it's like you already had a cool character set up. Like, oh, this kid that he like gave this shop to at the end of that movie, and he had like all this tech. I was like, oh, he could be the next Tony. I mean, like that could be so cool.
I'd be all about Ironheart if they do it the right way, but they're just like, with all these new characters, they're trying to rush it. They're just trying to rush it, and it's like, if you really want us to connect with Ironheart, you need to give her an origin story, or like a set up film or series. Like, and Wakanda Forever was not it. Like it's not enough. It's the same thing they did with like what's her name? What's the girl's name in Multiverse of Madness that they introduced? The heroine. I'm forgetting her name.
America.
Yeah. So it's like, it's the same thing with that. Like they're trying to rush us into these things.
She was great. I totally agree. America Chavez.
Yeah, I think she was good, and the girl who played Ironheart as well, I think were good actresses. But
they're all good.
Like, they just aren't giving the story its due process and like setting up the character for you to really care about that character.
So now thinking about it, now that we've kind of thought about it, like I feel like the problem is that they're bringing the new, like introducing major new characters that are going forward, going to be a major character, major player. I think the problem is they're introducing them, like the main them, as in someone else's movie. Like you said about like Multiverse of Madness, they introduced America Chavez in that movie, but she's playing second string to Doctor Strange, so she doesn't have any. Everyone's there for Doctor Strange. Don't give us a bunch of America Chavez. If you want to give us a bunch of America Chavez, give her a show, an origin show, or give her an origin movie, and then bring them together, because then you have all that backstory. But or have her play a little bit in the movie, kind of like with Black Widow. They, started inserting her in all these movies throughout, and then then she gets to become a bigger character, and she gets enough. She basically had her own movie cut into all the other movies, which was a super cool way of doing it. Mm-hmm. And then they gave her a prequel movie before she died, which was an okay movie, not good, not bad. It was just kind of like, okay,
kind of middle of the road.
Yeah, it was, which more served as a origin story for her sister. So, because I think she's gonna be in.
She's in Thunderbolts, I think, right?
I think she's in Thunderbolts. Yeah.
Yep.
So, cool, but like it more served as a. I guess that's a cool way of doing it. It's like we know Black Widow's out eventually because it's prequel, but now we're gonna introduce her sister, who's a BA. So.
Florence Pugh's amazing too. So she's great. So.
Yeah. I think that movie was, and a lot of movies, Marvel movies and DC movies even struggle with this, is the movies are great until the third act, and then it just turns into a VFX hot mess.
Totally agree.
So Black Widow was an awesome movie. I friggin' love that movie until the very end when they're on a giant airship and it's like they're jumping off parts through the air. I'm like, the whole point of these people is that they're not super strength, like superheroes. They're like super spies and, really good, but they're not going to be jumping from like platform to platform mid-air as everything's falling and fighting. Like that's what was so cool about like Hawkeye is like, in Avengers 2, like Age of Ultron, like that was super cool. He's like, I shouldn't be here. I have a bow and arrow. But he's doing bow and arrow things at a high skill level, but he's just doing bow and arrow things and doing his thing. And that's why we loved him, is because he's surrounded by all these like Thor God and, Hulk crazy. And then, super genius, super rich.
He's the
Man.
Relatable guy, right? To a certain
and
degree.
Then you're like, oh, got bow and arrow, but he's like worked hard and he's super good at it. And he does his part and he like saves the kids and the families, while the big heroes are doing, fighting the big villains. So, he's no Green Arrow.
No Green Arrow.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah. So that's. Okay. So, you mentioned your least favorite. And you kind of convinced me. I think you're probably right that is probably the weakest of it.
Yeah, but what's the least favorite?
Probably Eternals.
Ooh, I didn't want to bring that one up.
Yeah, it's just.
Man, it's getting a resurgence, by the way.
It was just.
I don't understand.
Interesting concept, but like it's the whole God issue. Like that's what DC struggles with, is they're all like gods, and it's like, okay, they're all gods and they all have like unlimited power. There's no stakes anymore. Just everything's world ending. Cool. Like I'm not worried about anyone except for Batman, who could just get destroyed, but they're never gonna kill Batman. So
true.
But
he
then
always survives.
Yeah, but then you had like, what is it, 5-6 characters in Eternals and
more.
Yeah, and I just couldn't, in one movie I couldn't keep them all, like all their story arcs straight. And then like I kind of cared about some of them, but like the acting wasn't very great anyways. And then the end, you have this giant celestial being coming out of Earth that just turns into rock and then is just there and never to be mentioned again in the entire MCU. So it's like, whoops, sorry guys, let's ignore this. Like, so I don't know, it's weird.
Eternals is just funny because I think that there was a couple things about Eternals. If Eternals had been like an hour shorter, it would have been better.
Which is weird because you have so many characters you had to introduce.
Totally, exactly.
But,
I mean, the whole intro of that movie was almost an hour long of just all of this stuff, and it was like, who cares? They should have cut the cast in half, cut the movie down an hour, and they should have focused. There was a storyline in that movie that was great, and it was that storyline about the things that they had created. I'm forgetting their names, but they had created those creatures, and he was like evolving.
Yeah.
And the whole aspect of him contemplating his own existence and the fact that his creator created him but hates him, that's a really fascinating theme to explore. This idea of the Celestials are gods. They created the Eternals. They created these other creatures, and now they hate them and they want to destroy them. Really fascinating storyline, I think, that could have been really solid, but that was one of 7 different storylines, and so it got too crazy. I think it could have been better.
Yeah, it either needed to be cut way back, like you're saying, or expanded to 2 or 3 movies.
2 movies, for
and
sure.
Just they tried to ride that line, and when you try and ride that line and you don't actually achieve that, like Love and Thunder, it falls apart.
Yep.
So
totally.
Oh man. Okay. So someone mentioned us wanting to go through our list our favorite X-Men movies. Where was it?
Man, I don't know if I
that's a whole other
nother stream, my friend.
Yeah, I can't find it anymore. Where did it go? Anyways, but yeah, that's a whole nother stream. But we want to do some more streams like this.
Totally.
Talk some movies, probably go over on your channel instead of my channel all the time.
That'd be fun.
So we'll do some, we were talking about top 5 underrated movies for different genres and things like that. We could talk DC next time.
Yeah, I mean, I was we didn't even get to talk about DC, and I am leaving a little bit for the summer for a trip, but I'd love when I get back, I'd love for us to do this again, man, for sure. And once I get my head wrapped around the tech a little bit,
it's easy. We'll get you set up.
Yeah, I'd love to get it over on my channel next time to just get you guys introduced over in my space. But yeah, man, thank you for this opportunity. This was fun.
Yeah. So let's see. I made a little there. Yeah. So if you guys haven't, I know a bunch of people have left already, but definitely hit up Movie Minute over there, Michael. You review you do a ton of videos and reviews.
I try to do one a week. Yeah, one a week if I can, and then sometimes I throw in an extra, and I try to do. I do 2 versions of a review typically. So I'll do my long form, kind of breaking the things down, always non-spoilers over on my channel, and then I'll do my 1 minute, the Movie Minute is keyed from that. I'll do a 60-second review and typically post it in shorts. So
yeah. So you do a ton of content. You got that free tickets or whatever. You pay for that monthly subscription to the theater.
So you're looking out for my Furiosa review this weekend. Should drop.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before we went live. Is you just saw Furiosa last night?
I did.
So, all right. Well, when are you leaving on your trip? A couple weeks or soon?
I'll leave in 6 days for my trip.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So
maybe I should go see.
We'll connect later in the summer.
Okay, I was gonna say maybe I could see Furiosa and then we can talk Furiosa or something like that. But that'd have to be real quick.
Yeah.
So
real quick.
So, all right, well, dude, thanks for coming and hanging out and chatting with us. And then, all of you all in the comments, Gibbons, Hodgins, definitely for chatting it up. Thank you guys. And if you're watching this after, thanks for watching. So make sure to comment, subscribe, smash the bell for notifications, do all those things. But definitely head over to the Movie Minute and follow Michael, because he does some really good reviews from an actual guy in the industry, making some making some cool content too. So if you're interested in that, definitely hit him up. So, all right. Thanks for joining us, guys. Take care. Bye.
Yeah.